Good afternoon, everybody. My name's Ian McCreeth. I'm the Sales Director for Corporate and the Health sectors for Banner Business Services. I'll give you a very quick synopsis of us a bit later on in the presentation. So, we're looking at price, cost and value. For those of you that don't know who Banner Business Services are, we're an office supplies company and we're part of a much larger group called the Office to Office Group. And the Office to Office Group is more of a business services organisation with logistics, warehousing. We've got a print management, digital marketing company. We're the non-sexy part of the group. We're the office supplies bit. And I'm talking as part of this presentation from the view of a supplier in a commoditised market. So that's the view that I'm taking on price, cost and value. And the idea being, how as a supplier can we look at things differently, influence things differently and manage the process for a contract, looking at the different elements. So I think the right place to start is for us to have a little look at some definitions. So, price. The quantity of payment or compensation given by one party to another in return for goods or services. Fairly self-explanatory. We'll have a look at price. We'll have a look at the tendering process. And we'll consider if a tendering process is managed on the basis of price and price alone as we go through the presentation. Cost, the value of money that has been used up to produce something. How much does it cost as opposed to how much do we pay for it? What are the different elements of cost and what can you do around cost to influence the decision-making process and manage a contract as you move through the process? And value is a measure of the benefit that can be gained from either a good or service or provider of the good or service. When we get to that, my view is the most important word in that particular sentence is benefit, but that is very subjective. And you could have completely polar opposite views from both parties in the process, and how do we make sure that those are all aligned? Any contract, as I'm sure you'd all agree, has to be dynamic. It can't be static, it can't stand still. It shouldn't be let and forget, because that's only going to drive one set of behaviours. And we'll see that as we go through the presentation, the customer and the supplier could be thinking about things in completely different ways. Things have to be aligned, the idea being look at the total life cycle value of the contract. And we'll look at those in individual detail. So let's look at the first aspect of what we're looking at. Price. As I said before, we operate in a commoditised market. Office services, office supplies, very, very commoditised. So that tends to lead one set of behaviours, which is frequent tendering of a commodity product. That has a number of impacts. First of all, suppliers' margins are going to be squeezed. Particularly as an incumbent supplier, you'll find that the supplier is likely to be trying to retain the business at all costs. If you're not the incumbent, you're going to make certain assumptions as you go through the tendering process. Or the bidding process, doesn't have to be a formal tender. And the assumptions that you're going to make are going to be based on the information that you're given or what you think you know about the customer. And that's dangerous, because what we assume we know and what we actually know are two completely different things. The assumptions are going to be, what is the customer going to buy? Now in our marketplace, traditionally it's very much on a core, non-core basis. So we'll see a tender for 1,000, 1,500 products. The customer wants their end users to buy those products. Those products are then tendered and bid by the supplier at a price which is close to, at, or well below cost, with the expectation that they can drive different behaviour in the end user community by buying more non-core, where they can make much greater margins. That's where the supplier's looking to influence behaviours away from the tendered lines. Now, the customer has let a bid, made a bid. I want my customers to be buying from this list of products. The supplier's trying to encourage behaviour onto buying things from another set of products. The two don't match. Immediately, you've got conflict between supplier and customer because the ideas aren't aligned. You're not working in the same way. So you're not working to mutually aligned goals. Potentially, it leads to a lot of cost from the customer's side because the supplier needs a lot of supervision. You've got to keep rebasing the pricing. You've got to keep looking at what you're doing, how you're doing it, why you're doing it. Are we communicating to end users properly? So there's a cost element that's got to be built in, not from the supplier, from the customer. Does it encourage the supplier to understand the customer? Well, I don't think it does, because the customer is wanting one set of behaviours to be encouraged across their user base, and the supplier's looking for something completely different. Ultimately, if you put the resource from a customer's perspective onto the contract and you control it very tightly, the supplier is likely to move resource away onto something more profitable. Potentially, you lose great experience, you lose a lot of individuals who could add value to you moving forwards. We'll look at that as we move forward later on. So the tactics to reduce the price, we're going to tender, we're going to negotiate, we've got the margin erosion side of it. And what are the key drivers in that decision-making process? Well, they're two completely disparate things. The supplier is potentially looking at volume, and we've got a customer who's looking to buy at the best price at that given moment, or is willing to put the resources to manage things moving forwards. The two don't work together. Okay, cost. We'll start with what I call the priceberg. As we know, all the nasty stuff on an iceberg, or the majority of it, sits below the waterline. So let's look at the priceberg for the costberg, as we might want to call it. So from a customer's perspective, we've got the price is what we pay. That's the bit above the waterline at the top. The supplier's perspective is looking at it from the point of view as how and when do I recover my costs? And we'll get to understanding the supplier cost base in a second. But in essence, you've got acquisitional costs, you've got variable costs. And I'll unbundle those two in a second. What resources does the supplier have to put onto the contract? There's a question, you could flip it over, what resources does the customer have to apply as well? We've recently been through a process where one of our customers has a dedicated resource who manages non-core demand. We've said that that should appear in our costing model because that's something we can do something about and take that cost out moving forwards, deliver the benefit, realign those resources. So it's those sorts of things that we need to think about. Are there other TUPE implications and wider TUPE implications, and what is that going to cost and what are those potential impacts? Are there environmental, are there energy related, or are there financing considerations that we as a supplier need to take as part of that process as well? Ultimately, the view of recovering the cost and how that gets captured in the price is beholden on the supplier, absolutely. The question then is, how well is the contract managed through the contract life cycle to manage those costs, which will determine how cost effective that's going to be. I think there's one key important question that the supplier has to ask themselves first, and that is, how well do I understand my costs? I think that there are some fairly interesting responses and answers you'd get if you asked that question. So let's unbundle some of those costs just for a second. So from an acquisitional cost perspective, we've got the tender process costs. I can speak from our experience when we have sales input, we have bid management input, we have costing input, we have merchandising input. There's a lot of resource goes into that particular process, which generates our initial price. Our initial price has to form part of that initial acquisition cost. You've then got the implementation cost. We dedicate a project manager to each of those, to every implementation that we undertake, but they pull resources from every other division in our business. So from logistics, warehousing, finance, customer service, everybody gets involved. And then you've got the IT development costs. Are there system links that need to be put in place? And where does the burden of cost sit with all of those? Most importantly is variable cost. The variable cost, as far as I see it, is the cost for the supplier to actually deliver the contract. So you're looking at account management and customer support in terms of those significant costs there. Pick, pack, dispatch and delivery. Obviously we're a commoditized office supplies organisation. That's what we do. We deliver boxes. We get it in one end of a shed and we ship it out the other, and we get it to the right place at the right time. There's a cost associated with all of that. Ongoing development costs. People change, processes change, systems change throughout the life of any contract period, so there's always going to be an element of ongoing cost. Debt, out of terms debt, stock funding, all those sorts of things also need to be taken into account as part of that funding process. From our perspective as a business, I can tell you how much it costs in each of our warehouses to walk from point A to a stock location, pick a product and take it back to the confirmation station, whether it's a pen, a box or a pallet. I can tell you exactly by postcode how much it costs us to deliver a box, 10 boxes or a pallet to any location in the UK. We know how much an inbound call costs, how much an outbound call costs, how many outbound calls we make. You have to understand your variable costs to be able to generate the price that is sustainable moving forwards. You've then got your fixed costs. So that's your infrastructure, your support functions such as HR, finance, all those sorts of things. They all have to be paid for somewhere. So there has to be an element of apportionment within any customer's pricing for those. So effectively, what we're trying to do is we're trying to look at the whole life cycle costs of any contract. We're not looking at the price on day one, we're looking at what benefit you can deliver throughout the life of the contract. If you understand the cost, you can then work on how you can eliminate some of that cost moving forwards. It's not necessarily the price of the product that is the key driver, it's the cost of delivering the service and the contract that's the key driver. So in the mobilisation phase, what are we looking at? We're looking at what's the current state, what does go live state look like, and what does future state look like. But can we get from current state to future state and deliver the savings and efficiencies early in the contract? Those are the sorts of things that should be considered as part of that process. Learning is a key phase for the account management. If your account management team are understanding what your customer wants, what their personal and business drivers are, what their aspirations are for the contract, you're going to work together to deliver them, as long as they understand what our challenges are as a supplier. In terms of getting better, that's when you start to deliver those benefits. You've got to have a robust account management plan, you've got to have a development plan that both parties buy into, both parties agree. It's a question of what are we doing, how are we doing it, why do we do it that way, and how can we do it better? And if there's a cost benefit from both parties, then obviously it's something that needs to be explored and delivered as quickly as possible, depending on the value. If we get those things wrong, we'll follow the red line. Obviously the green line is where everyone wants to take it, because that's most cost effective and efficient for everybody. I'm not going to talk about exit, because as far as I'm concerned, if we've done a good job together for the 2 or 3 years of the contract period, we'll actually be looking at carrying on that relationship and delivering more advantage and more benefit. So I won't talk about that. But the key is consideration at the point of tender of the life cycle cost of the contract. In terms of eliminating waste, we've got Lean, we've got Six Sigma. We don't, as a business, have any yellow belts, black belts or brown belts, but we do have a very robust CI program, and that's looked at every single part of the business. And that does reduce our cost. Now, if the customer understands what our costs are and works with us to reduce our costs, there's a price benefit to the customer. And ultimately, it just changes the matrix in terms of how you look at things and how you build things. Value. As I said right at the outset, I think value is subjective, because your view of when someone's adding value is going to be different to mine. And each of you in the room would have a completely different view on that to each other. So some of the questions that you could be asking is, the supplier working with me to meet my specific objectives? Is it all about the person, the individual, the department, the business? What are those objectives? What do they look like? The key question, that one, is, does the supplier understand what they are? Is my supplier one who delivers against the contract and demands little of my time? Is this a let and forget contract? Is it not important? Am I not going to derive benefit from it? Do I not have to spend any time on it? Can I concentrate on something else? That could be seen as adding value. From a supplier's perspective, I don't like that one. Is my supplier bringing additional products and services to my attention? The key question probably is, are they bringing relevant products and services to my attention? Is that what I want from the supplier? Do I want to concentrate on this contract, and do I want to drive benefit out of this contract? So you can immediately see that the question of delivering benefit is an individual question. But the customer and the supplier have to talk about that. Where is the benefit going to come from? How can we deliver it? What can we do? How are we going to track it? If you don't agree that at the outset, it's very difficult to play catch-up. From our world, in our perspective, because of the group that we are, we're obviously looking at other access to other opportunities. Can we deliver in other services? Is there a CSR benefit? Should we be talking to them about closed loop? Is there a point of sale benefit, in which case we've got the print side of it? So there are a number of different questions to be asked. My view and the target that we set our salespeople is to make the office supplies contract first the most efficient contract it can be. Should we be delivering pens and pencils to the same location every day of the week? No, we shouldn't. It's not that important. It should be easy to manage it. So how can we drive cost out by making that more efficient? How can we make the ordering process more efficient? How can we cut the number of queries down so we can let people concentrate on their day jobs and not have to order the office supplies? But it's not just about the end user, it's about the whole stakeholder community. Effectively, we've got to think about from a buyer's perspective. Where's the commercial benefit? It's probably the first question that you'd be asked in that situation as a supplier. Commercial benefit does not have to come from our contract. If there is an opportunity to deliver a commercial benefit by consolidating deliveries or logistics, and we can offer that service because we're delivering the office supplies, why not take advantage of it? It may well have an impact on somebody else's contract, but there's still a commercial advantage to be delivered. In terms of the specifier, does it make things more efficient? Am I getting more for less? And from an end user's perspective, they may just want to, as I said before, concentrate on the day job. Make my life as easy as possible. Make this process simple. Get it to me right first time complete. That's what I want. Alternatively, there may be CSR questions that they want to ask themselves as well. So if the supplier and the customer aren't working to mutually aligned goals, it's very difficult to deliver mutual benefit. Okay, so just to summarise, the considerations of price, cost and value are driven predominantly from a supplier's perspective by the customer's requirement and their route to market. Commoditised markets will challenge on price. We know that, we're aware of that. There are other ways of doing it. We have a number of contracts which are completely and utterly open book. Every customer sees what we pay for the product, what it costs to service their contract, and how much we make as a profit from that contract. If you want to change the way that things are done, and you want to start asking those sorts of questions as a supplier, you've got to be able to engage early. I've used the word engage a lot. I've used the word aligned a lot, and I've used the word mutual a lot. And I think it's the key here is if you've got a customer who is willing to listen, you've got a supplier who is willing to make the suggestions, then you've got a partnership that's going to work. And I know the partnership word is a little bit twee, but it does work. If you're both working together, you're both pulling in the same direction, you'll deliver mutual benefit. And that is the end from me. Thank you very much for spending 25 minutes listening to me drone on. If you have any questions at all relating to anything that you've heard, myself and my colleagues are on stand number 4. If you want to challenge me on anything that you've heard, I'm on stand number 12. Thank you.